On today's show, Evgeny Kuznetsov to the KHL. Not so fast.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, Evgeny Kuznetsov to the KHL, not so fast, says Kuzy's Russian agent and friend. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We will talk about Chychrun to the Capitals and what was in it for the Senators. We'll talk about that. And then in the final segment, why Matt Roy? What will he mean to this team? But just to get it going here, the lead story here is Evgeny Kuznetsov to the KHL. That is the rumblings that were out there yesterday. But his agent had to kind of clean up his mess of what was said out there. And if you are familiar with Evgeny Kuznetsov, you know that oftentimes he speaks off the cuff. And, you can even think about a couple different occasions on the Capitals where he said he wanted out of the district to the certain Russian media sources, and then he would refute those. So I think that the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. I think that Kuzy is a guy that kind of shoots from the hip, and it keeps his people, if you will, busy with trying to do cleanup. But talking about Kuzy considering the move to the KHL, the Caps and Carolina Hurricanes received unexpected news on Monday, and unexpected to me as well, when reports surfaced that Kuzy is considering leaving the NHL for the KHL. According to the Russian publication at Championat, Kuznetsov plans to ink a 4-year deal with SKA St. Petersburg and will do after negotiating the termination of the final year of his contract. Was initially signed by the Caps not so many years ago. So an interesting move, but this is where it gets interesting and why the Russian agent had to say, I don't know why this is gaining so much traction, but let me set the record straight. Russian agent Shumi Babayev, a friend of Kuznetsov, mentioned in an interview with Championat that it's premature to discuss Kuzy leaving the NHL despite reported interest from SKA and other teams. Babayev expressed his friend's hunger for hockey and desire to excel in the game, but emphasized that it's too early to confirm Kuzy's return to the Russian KHL. And it's an interesting move, all things considered. Evgeny Kuznetsov wanting to go back home. Is that what it's about? Going home? I guess I can see that. But if Evgeny Kuznetsov struggled playing U.S. hockey in the NHL, then why would things be better for him in the KHL? Is the bar set lower in the KHL? I don't think so, as the KHL is the premier league over in Russia. So an interesting thing and an interesting move, all things considered. I think that I think maybe there's more pressure perhaps in the United States, and I guess, Canada as well, about players living up to certain potential. So talking about the implications here for the Caps and the Canes, really, should Kuzy opt to play overseas, what are the implications for the Caps and their former star center, whose skill contributed to their first Stanley Cup victory in 2018? And what will happen to his cap hit? Per Puckpedia, if Kuzy and the Hurricanes mutually terminate their contract, The expected outcome is the removal of the cap hit, and he will not receive payment. This would also relieve the $3.9 million that the Caps are paying. There is also the possibility of a buyout, and the penalty would be divided between both teams. But however, the initial buyout window has closed, and the additional window opens after all arbitration cases are resolved. And I think this is a bit of a show, a bit of a song and dance, if you will, about him wanting to play in Russia. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And it's an interesting, he was a guy that had to eat some humble pie when he got waived by the Capitals after exiting the NHL's player assistance program. A guy that is used to flying around in chartered jets, playing in the NHL, found himself playing in the AHL, where they ride around in chartered buses. There was one viral video of him carrying a pillow, getting onto a bus. Ultimately never played that game for the Hershey Bears, but I think to a certain extent, he kind of sees where things are headed. I think that he sees his time in the NHL is a bit murky. I'm not saying it's impossible that he doesn't play next year in the NHL. I'm just saying that it's kind of edging more in the direction of being unlikely. Talking about Kuzy's career and, well, future, for now, it's a wait-and-see situation regarding number 92, who accumulated 575 points in a total of 743 games across 11 years in the NHL, split between the Caps and the Canes. So interesting times, all things considered, for Evgeny Kuznetsov, a guy who's had a bumpy ride, to be sure, in the NHL. And he was given an opportunity by the Hurricanes and never really lived up to potential there either. Listen, we know why that happened is, well, the Capitals wanted out of the Kuzy contract. It was not working, or his time playing on the team. Let me rephrase that. It wasn't working. So the hope by Brian McClellan was that a change of scenery would be what the doctor ordered. He had some flashes of greatness, I guess, with the Canes, but it was a pretty small sample size to fully gauge if playing on a different team in a different city made a big difference. But all things considered, I would be most surprised if Kuzy, in fact, does play on the NHL next season. I would be most surprised just because of inconsistency. Everyone else around the NHL can see the back of his hockey card. You take a look at him, a former first-round pick, but you can't live on former glory. And I think back to the hype, and before he came over here, there was a lot of buzz about when this Kuznetsov guy, no one even knew how to say his name back then, when he was going to join the team. And at first, initially played very well. And of course, 2018 super clutch for the Capitals and, well, winning a Stanley Cup. But since then, it's been a bumpy ride. And I remember Tarek El-Bashir talking like 2 or 3 years ago, talking about trading Evgeny Kuznetsov, but there were no takers. So it's a good situation for the Capitals, all things considered. Even a better situation if that contract is terminated and there's some more money available there. But, at the end of the day, I wish Kuzy nothing but the best. If he decides to go over to Russia and play in the KHL and does a really good job, I'm happy for him. And I wish him nothing but the best. And I'm ultimately think that is the direction that things are trending in. All right, so coming up here after the break, we will talk about the huge move that former GM Brian McClellan made last summer. The blue line had some problems and needed to be upgraded. So what did BMAC do? He swung for the fences and connected by landing Jakob Chychrun. Where does he fit into the Capitals' master plans? I'll discuss straight ahead. We're driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find a quality candidate fast. That's important when you're looking to fill holes in your job. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to recent Indeed data. So if you are involved in the hiring, if you're involved in the firing, if you are involved in HR, you need Indeed. And listeners to this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Capitals podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire? You need Indeed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, talking about Jakob Chychrun here and what does he mean for the Capitals. Huge, all things considered, a big upgrade to the Capitals blue line. And to be clear here, this is not the first time that the Capitals have been all in on Jakob Chychrun. Before he went from the Coyotes to the Senators, well, the Capitals gave him the full court press. As it turns out, it wasn't meant to be then, but the Capitals all got him by a steal, I'm going to say. They got him by trading Jensen and a draft pick for getting an upper echelon blue liner. So let's talk about that. The acquisition of Chychrun by the Caps. Former GM Brian McClellan finalized a significant trade before assuming the role of the team's president of hockey ops. The trade involved acquiring Jakob Chychrun from the Ottawa Senators. The acquisition of Chychrun marked a strategic move, allowing Mac to secure a highly coveted defenseman for a price considerably below market expectations. And again, I have no idea what the Ottawa Senators are thinking. I have nothing disparaging to say about Nick Jensen. He's a good blue liner. I'm not going to say he's a great blue liner. And I guess the Ottawa Senators' loss is the Capitals' gain. And it's a team, the Sens, here to talk for a moment that kind of this next year, Dan, I'm telling you, that Sens team next year, they're going to be good. It's never lived up to the hype or the potential. But let's talk about how the Capitals acquired Chychrun and how the Senators got Chychrun in the first place. And I'll tell you, or I'll let you decide who you think got out better in that deal. In the trade, the Senators received Chychrun from the Coyotes in exchange for a conditional 2023 first-round pick, a conditional 2024 second-round pick, and a 2026 second-round pick. The Caps, however, only parted with Jensen and a 2026 third-round pick for Chychrun. All things considered, a great move, a stroke of genius by former GM BMAC, not mortgaging the farm. I don't want to think about it too much more. That the Ottawa Senators, I don't know if they were inebriated or what the case was, but to part with a player like that is quite a head scratcher, I guess I'm going to say. But to be fair, I've listened to our friends over on Locked On Senators that it wasn't a good fit in Ottawa for whatever reason. And I understand that there are some question marks that surround Chychrun. He is the guy that if he's not happy somewhere, he'll reach out to his agent saying, I want out of the Coyotes. I want out of the Senators. And this summer, one of the things that he said is he didn't want to spend his summer worrying about where he's going to be playing in the fall. So that was taken care of on July 1st. Hopefully he can now rest up and his body and mind will be in a good condition in the fall. Talking about the impact on the Senators here for a moment, the absence of Chychrun has left the Senators defensive unit in, well, a less favorable position with limited cap space of only $1.9 million. The Sens are observing the Atlantic's division's progression ahead of them. Although the addition of 2023 Vezina Trophy winner Linus Ullmark is anticipated to bolster the team, the outcome may be difficult for Sens fans to reconcile. And again, this is a team that has had some pretty big-name netminders go to their team. And the netminders, they can't do it all. If I'm familiar or if I can recollect correctly, I think that the Sens sometimes, like the Capitals, air their netminders out to dry. And the netminder can't do everything, but I do think that Linus Ullmark is worthwhile. So let's talk about the comparisons between Chychrun and Jensen and ultimately who won that deal just based on those facts alone. So let's talk about the age thing. Jensen, age 33, is a right shot defenseman with a $4 million cap hit. In the previous season, he recorded 1 goal and 13 assists in 78 games. Displaying a Corsi percentage of 44.8. On the other hand, Chychrun, aged 26, is a left shot defenseman in the final year of his contract. Why is that? Why did the Capitals re-up him? Well, BMAC said that he wanted to make sure it was a good fit for the Capitals. He wanted to make sure it was a good fit for Chychrun. A wise decision. Overcoming previous injury concerns, he played 82 games in Ottawa, registering 41 points and a 49.9 Corsi percentage. An objective comparison of the two players clearly illustrates their respective qualities and how the Caps came out ahead in that deal. I don't think that's really debatable there, that the Capitals had a lot of questions on the blue line. And I'll talk about Matt Roy in the next segment here of that John Carlson, good old number 74, logs heavy minutes, 25 to 30 minutes a night. But how much better will he be able to play when he is not expected to take on the bulk of the weight? Now, there are outside tertiary things that I haven't mentioned here about injury. We don't know. Worst case scenario, well, could you imagine if Chychrun or, Matt Roy got injured in the first handful of games of the season? That could change everything. But for right now, in mid-July, how this team is sketched out, I think they're in a pretty good position. The blue line in particular is really good. You take a look at Alexia, for example, who had to be patient and fight to get a job because Joel Edmondson was acquired last summer. You take a look at Rasmus Sandin, a young defenseman, Martin Faravari as well. And not to mention, the guys, you got TVR in the mix there. That there's players down in Hershey as well. Vinny Iorio, Dylan McElrath, Chase Prisky. There are a lot of options, not all necessarily NHL ready talent. So, you take a look at Carlson, you take a look at Chychrun, Matt Roy, Faravari, Sandin, Alexiev, TVR. I think the Capitals are in a pretty good position. Again, Dylan McElrath, for me, he really popped off the page in the playoffs, a leader, as we know, wearing the C down in Hershey. So, questions that need to be answered. Many of those questions will not be able to be answered until the fall, however. All right, so coming up here after the break, the blue line got better, but it wasn't just Chychrun. The Capitals brought in a big name that's not one of the sexier names in the NHL, Matt Roy. Where does he fit in, and what was BMAC thinking? I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So when you take a look at the moves that were made on July 1st, there was a lot of hype, talking about Jakob Chychrun. And then before July 1st, we're talking about Pierre-Luc Dubois. We're talking about Andrew Mangiapane, those kind of deals that you take a look at it, there was a lot of hype. But one of the names that kind of flew under the radar was the addition of Matt Roy. But the Capitals, make no mistake about it, were all in. A 6-year deal. And what's the deal with Matt Roy? Why Matt Roy? Why is he a name that a lot of people aren't familiar with? Well, he is a guy that does not have a really big offensive flair, right? He is a guy that prides himself in his defense. And that's okay. The Capitals could use some stout defense. But what is the biggest thing that Matt Roy brings to the team? Alleviates a tremendous amount of pressure on John Carlson. So that for sure is one of the big keys for bringing him here. So signing Matt Roy with the Caps inked a 6-year, $40.25 million deal with Roy during the opening day of free agency. The Kings players might easily go unnoticed in the bustling city, so some hockey enthusiasts might have been taken aback to see Roy listed among the top free agents. Roy is indifferent to his low profile as he quietly has been delivering exceptional defensive performances with the Kings. He had a -1 rating in his debut 25-game season in the NHL in 2018-2019, but he has not ended a season with a negative rating since then. So that is quite something. Got off to a slow start. That is to be expected, but came in huge for LA. Roy achieved his career high in points during the 22-23 season with 26 points and followed it up with a 25-point season last season. The most remarkable statistic, however, is his plus-minus standing at plus 66 in 344 games since his rookie year. Despite flying under the radar in LA, he is likely to do the same in Washington, yet there's no doubting that he will enhance the Capitals as a team. And it wasn't just the Capitals. He is a guy that has value. He is a guy that a lot of other teams pursued, most notably the Toronto Maple Leafs. But there were several teams that were vying to secure Roy's services, with the Toronto Maple Leafs among them. Ultimately, the Leafs opted to sign Chris Tanev instead, but Roy is the preferable choice given his age and contract duration. So let's talk about the offseason moves. How much better are the Capitals right now? There are a lot of question marks. Make no mistake about it. As you take a look at PLD, a lot of questions. I'm cautiously optimistic that he's going to have a better season. The word out there is that he was underutilized in LA, didn't have a good rapport with some of the players there, even though Matt Roy talked about PLD saying that he was a great guy to play with. So there's question marks there. Andrew Mangiapane, for example, is a guy that really popped off the page a couple years ago, but has never lived up to that former glory. And then you take a look at the blue line. I think the blue line's in a pretty good position, but Alex Ovechkin, talking about Ovi here for a minute, that is why there's question marks. Despite these big moves that were made, what kind of Ovi are we going to see? Last season, slowest start ever. All-Star break, went to Dubai, rode around on camels, came back, killed it the rest of the season. Now, that's not a rubber stamp. That's not a carbon copy. What kind of Ovi are we going to see next season? That is the big question. And also, what the center positions. There's a lot of things to consider here. So big moves made for the Capitals. Make no mistake about it. But what will they look like? You might have inquiries about the Capitals' approach this offseason. It's evident they aim to take advantage of Ovi's remaining years, but there might not be much more to gain from it. The Caps staged an unlikely playoff run last season only to be swept by the Rangers in the first round. Do their offseason maneuvers position them for a more favorable outcome? It's promising for the Caps that he chose them, although Roy's decision is intriguing. As outlined earlier, the Caps might not be fully prepared to contend. They might become a stronger team, but there are a numerous amount of opportunities for regression. Again, I do appreciate what Brian McClellan did. He did not mortgage the farm. He made some key acquisitions without giving up top-name prospects, big-name players on the team. But with that said, there's some question marks. Risky moves, to quote Brian McClellan. He said those words. I'm not paraphrasing. That is what he said. So with the acknowledgement that those moves are risky, PLD, again, is a risky move. We don't know. Can Charlie Lindgren live up to former glory? Those are the questions that will only be able to be answered in the fall. Again, I'm already excited about next season, and we're halfway through July, but I cannot wait to see how these acquisitions, will Roy and Chychrun fix what ailed the blue line last season. I'm really hoping that is the case, because I don't want that to be, the case yet again next season. But there are questions in the regard, things that you cannot plan for. Injuries, however, you take a look at Roy, you take a look at Chychrun or any of the other big scorers out there, for example. If they got injured in the first 5 games of the season, that's going to kind of mitigate or lessen some of the moves that were made. But on paper, and that's all we can go on right now, is how this team is sketched out in front of us. The moves that Brian McClellan made before being promoted, giving the keys over to Chris Patrick, saying, here it is, I kind of filled it up with gas for you, don't bang it up. That is the position the Capitals are in. I'm happy with it. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm not overly optimistic, but I like the moves that were made. I think the Capitals are in a much better position than they were to end the season. Again, backing into victory, getting eliminated. Those are the kind of things that, again, they made it to the playoffs, a victory, but I would like to see a more durable team. I would like to see a team that came out of the gate swinging in the fall instead of, kind of muttering and making your way through it slowly. I think they're in a better position now because Spencer Carberry is familiar with most of these players. I know the new acquisitions will take a while to get acclimated, but there's not going to be that same learning curve for a majority of the players out on the ice. So a good move for the Capitals. It'll be interesting to see, however, how this materializes in the fall. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel, available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holmey, and I'll talk to you again next time.